Hello everyone, today I'm at the Canadian War Museum and I'm going to take you on a journey through Canada's military history. Let's go check it out. Right, so we're going to start at Section 1, Battleground, Wars on Our Soil, Earliest Times to 1885. So in wartime, hunting tools became military weapons. Effective armor limited casualties. The first peoples made lethal weapons from wood, stone, and bone. The power of these weapons depended upon the strength and skill of individual warriors. Combat was limited to the distance they could throw a spear, fire an arrow, or swing a club. So there's a really impressive scene here. The level of detail is really impressive. In Iroquoian communities in what is now southern Ontario, every man and woman had a military role. The two sections of this model show an Iroquoian community in peacetime and under attack. Iroquoians shared similar languages, economies based on farming, hunting, and fishing, and a sophisticated style of warfare. Two of the best known groups are the Huron Confederacy and the Iroquois League. They fought a long war over control of the hunting grounds north of the St. Lawrence. There's so much to see and do here. You could certainly come many times and see different things every time. So I'm just going to show you highlights of this fabulous museum. So, First People and the French survived the post-contact wars by working together and trading tactics and technology. First Peoples adopted firearms and other European products. The French adopted First Peoples clothing and equipment, including moccasins, canoes, snowshoes, and tomahawks. The French taught First Peoples how to use firearms. First Peoples taught the French how to fight in the forest. Algonquians, Iroquois from Kanawaki, Hurons and the French formed a powerful alliance that fought the Iroquois League until 1701 and the British until 1760. Here's a tomahawk. I love this. How cool is that? Them fighting together. And then right here, look how long that is. So that is a matchlock musket. Early matchlock muskets like this reproduction were heavy and difficult to aim. Here's a better look of the scene. So the Great Peace of 1701 resolved the differences between the Iroquois League and the First Peoples French Alliance. This allowed the First Peoples of the region to live without fear of attack and left the French free to focus on their British enemies. All right. Now we're going to be passing through here. Check out these flags. So war wipes a Canadian city off the map. Louisbourg flourished as a naval base, fishing port, and commercial center until 1758. In that year, 13,000 British soldiers and a massive fleet attacked the fortified city and overwhelmed 7,000 French defenders. The British deported Louisbourg's residents to France and abandoned the remains of the fortified city at the end of the war. Right, so now we're going to go through this section, 1759, Battle for Canada. So 150 years of French-British conflict in North America ended in the 7 Years' War and the British conquest of Canada. So here is another fantastic diagram of, so this is the Plains of Abraham, 1759. In June 1759, the Royal Navy carried a powerful British army to Quebec on the verge of defeat after an unsuccessful 3-year siege. British troops landed west of Quebec on September 13th. An army of French regulars, Canadian militia, and First People warriors met them in battle on the Plains of Abraham. The British won. Following a 30-minute clash of arms, Quebec City surrendered a few days later. All right, so next, the War of 1812. For Americans, their invasions of Canada during the American Revolution and War of 1812 were minor campaigns, yet for Canadians, they were desperate struggles for survival. The American Revolution. In 1775, American anger over taxation and British attempts to limit Western settlement exploded into revolution. Within months, the rebels invaded Canada to secure their northern frontier. British colonies that joined the rebellion became the United States of America. Those that defeated American invaders and local rebels later came together to form Canada. So check this out. Look at the level of detail. Hopefully you can see there's even soldiers down there. Come around here. Look at that. That's incredible. So, victory at Quebec City. This model shows a key moment in the defeat of the American attack on Quebec City in 1775. American rebels used ladders to climb a barricade across Sault-au-Matelot Street in Lower Town. French-speaking militia fire through windows at the attackers. British regulars stand ready in the street to resist an American breakthrough. And French-speaking militia and Royal Highland emigrants climb a ladder to expel the rebels from a house overlooking the British position. So there's all kinds of things to look at in this section. Wow, check this out. Absolutely love these historic uniforms. So, many French Canadians from Upper Canada served in the militia during the War of 1812. This blunderbuss, an early shotgun, belonged to the Rousseau family. Lieutenant Colonel Jean-Baptiste Rousseau of the 2nd York Militia fought at the Battle of Queenston Heights. His son, Lieutenant George Rousseau, served as a liaison officer with Britain's First People's Allies. So, this gun is called a blunderbuss. And then the Military General Services Medal, which is right here. So this medal belonged to George Pierce of the Upper Canadian Militia. The British government created the Military General Service Medal in 1847 to honor veterans of the War of 1812 and other conflicts. The bar on this medal recognizes Pierce's participation in the capture of Detroit. All right, so the next section for Crown and Country, the South African and First World Wars, 1885 to 1931. I love the details of this display. And here is an actual photograph. So, at Paardeberg, the Royal Canadian Regiment first attacked on February 18th, 1900. Accurate bore fire forced them to take cover. Broiling in the hot sun, this soldier, trapped in the open, had found partial protection behind a large anthill. By the time the South African War began in 1899, the British Army had abandoned its familiar red coats for the camouflage of khaki uniforms. The infantry carried a standard .303 Lee Enfield Mk1 rifle. Canadians added the maple leaf badge to the covered cork helmet. Okay, so the South African War, 1899 to 1902. Canadians fought with the British against Afrikaner settlers, often called Boers, for control of two small South African republics. After 3 years of costly battles and guerrilla warfare, the British Empire prevailed. Assigned to serve as the British rear guard, Canadian troops kept Boer forces at bay with rifle, machine gun, and artillery fire. This action covered the British retreat, prevented the capture of Canadian field guns, and enhanced Canada's military reputation. 3 members of the Royal Canadian Dragoons, Sergeant Edward Holland and Lieutenant Hampton Cockburn and Richard Turner, were awarded the Victoria Cross. And here is a map. Here's what their uniforms looked like at the time. Here's some medals. So the British failed to bring the Boer troops to battle or force their surrender. Instead, they attempted to deny the Boers with logistical support from sympathetic farmers. Wow, check this out. So before the nation had a navy, the Canadian government ship CGS Canada patrolled the East Coast searching for illegal American fishing vessels, a high speed steel hulled ship with quick firing guns. It also had a ram to attack other ships if necessary. The Canada served during the First World War, guarding the East Coast against German U boat attacks. All right, so now we are going into the First World War, 1914 to 1918. The Canadian division arrived on the Western Front in February 1915, 18,000 strong and anxious for battle after months of training in England. It's a fabulous painting here. English Marine artist Norman Wilkinson painted Canada's first contingent. Over 32,000 soldiers sailed to Britain in 30 passenger liners in October 1914. At the time, it was the single largest group ever to sail from Canada. So this section, the Western Front, 1915. Wow, check this out. This is incredible. So, the 18-pounder, this was the most common gun used by Canadian British artillery batteries. Guns like this fired an estimated 100 million shells during the war, an average of 43 rounds per minute from 1914 to 1918. Wow. Here's another fabulous painting. Look at the level of detail.
Des fois, ça a l'air de rien. C'est quelque chose.
Interning Canadians. The Canadian government interned 8,579 immigrants, mostly from enemy countries, Austria, Hungary, and Germany, during the First World War. These Canadians were seen as security risks. The shock of war, rumors of planned uprising, and deep prejudice led many Canadians to lobby for the internment of immigrants from enemy countries. Some internees were German, but most originated from Ukraine, then part of the Austro-Hungarian Empire. Men, with some women and children, were put behind barbed wire in hard labor camps. Some 107 internees died in confinement. Many others suffered from ill health and shattered spirits. The internment of several thousand Canadians left painful scars. Here is a real photo. This is a part of our history that I think a lot of us are not aware of. So do your bit. In a popular wartime phrase, everyone on the home front was encouraged to do your bit to support the soldiers and the war effort. Oh, I just want to show you this photo here I just noticed. It's an incredible historic photo. This wartime rally in Ottawa to support departing troops reflects the strength of Canadian patriotism. Wow. So this is the Parliament building. Hmm. Wow. So the trench system. Look at the level of detail. You can see all the soldiers in the trenches. Imagine. I can't. I truly can't imagine what it must have been like to live under these conditions. Okay, so this is a bit interactive here. Trench system, move my shadow. Press the buttons to identify key features on this model. Okay, so there's a bunch of buttons. So frontline trench, the jagged front line, trench faced no man's land and the enemy. Okay, so you see, I hope the camera picks it up. You can see the red lights. I'll try one more here. Medical aid, stretcher bearers carried in wounded soldiers for urgent aid by a medical officer. See? All right. Oh, I can see in the far corner there's a red light. Hopefully you can see that as well. Let's just try one more for fun. A sniper. Hidden snipers remain motionless for hours as they wait for their prey. Okay, so I press the button. Oh, okay, can you see? In the corner there, just shows you that they're pretty hidden. I didn't even notice them. And there's another one in the far corner there. Wow, that is a fantastic way to learn about it. All right, so now we get to walk through this interactive trench. Wow, this is a really cool way to experience it. Gap and wire. There's a soldier right here. There's a helmet right here. Wow, I think that's a phone. Oh, let's backtrack a moment and you can see the soldiers on the other side. Oh, so there's another soldier here, curled up with a blanket. And we've got some equipment in the corner here. All right. So that is what it's like to be in a trench. Wow, so all kinds of things to look at here. Trench weapons. The big push. After 2 years of trench warfare, the Allies had raised huge armies to break through the German trenches in the Somme region of France. All right, so the Somme, 1916. Wow, check this out. That's incredible. Let's see what this says. So this is an MG-08, the German Army's standard machine gun. Could fire 450 rounds a minute up to a range of 1,800 meters. German machine gun crews in protected positions and supporting one another killed hundreds of thousands during the war. Water kept the MG08 from overheating during sustained fire. Armor protection and a shield kept the water jacket from being punctured by enemy fire. Here's one more look at it. Wow. Check out that plane. That is incredible. What an incredible piece of war history. So, Vimy 1917. So Vimy 1917, the Canadian Corps captured Vimy Ridge in April 1917 through brutal and costly fighting. It was hailed as a victory at the time. And here is an image. Wow, check that out.
Mais la bataille n'est pas terminée. 3 jours plus tard, 3 divisions canadiennes.
This is incredible to look at. So it says it's called the Great Killer. So, artillery fire inflicted approximately 60% of all wounds during the First World War. Here's some images. Shrapnel shells are timed to burst in the air, produce a deadly cone-shaped rain of whirling metal. And here is some shrapnel. So what is shrapnel? So some artillery rounds were packed with these marble-sized lead balls. Here they are. Called shrapnel bullets, which burst from the shell when it detonated in the air. Other rounds, called high explosive shells, were designated to explode into jagged fragments of steel, like those on the left. Both the balls and the fragments were often simply referred to as shrapnel and provoked devastating injuries. Wow.
A German soldier described the shell fire. Let the eye seems to the cloud. They see the mass of the earth.
Do my best to get my shadows out of their way. Vimy sign. So the Vimy-Levin line was a series of German defensive positions. By the end of the battle, the Germans had retreated from the ridge and their trenches. The Canadians put up this sign to indicate their newly won territory. Wow, that's an incredible piece of history as well. Right, so howitzer 8-inch. This 8-inch howitzer could fire an enormous high explosive 90-kilogram shell up to a range of 11 kilometers. Wow. Howitzers were used to pound trenches or targets in the enemy's rear area. The trajectory of fire was very high, with the shell plunging downward to deliver a devastating explosion. Check out this diagram here. So the creeping barrage was a moving wall of artillery fire forcing the enemy to remain under cover where he could not fire on the attacking infantry, although shells often fell short and killed attacking troops. An effective creeping barrage usually made the difference between victory and defeat for the attacker. Oh, this really caught my eye. So this is a grave marker. Soldiers marked the graves of the fallen with temporary wooden crosses like this one. After the war, the Imperial War Graves Commission, now called the Commonwealth War Graves Commission, established permanent cemeteries, often moving soldiers' remains from temporary graves to this final resting place. So here is a very sad image. See what else is around this corner before I move on. Wow. Okay, so this is a captured and recaptured machine gun. The Germans captured this machine gun from the Russians on the Eastern Front and used it against Canadians while defending Vimy Ridge. The Canadian 54th Battalion captured the gun on April 9th, 1917, in its attack up the heights towards Hill 145. Note the evidence of bullet strikes on the armored shield. And here is a real photo. And then let's take a closer look. I do see like it has a bunch of dents in it, so I guess that's what they mean. Wow, what is this? The guns mounted on Barker's Sopwith Snipe fuselage are the same ones he used in his October 27, 1918 air battle. The Vickers guns were air-cooled versions of the infantry machine gun. They had an effective range of 2,000 meters and fired 450 to 500 rounds a minute. Here's a picture. I'll just show you. It's a bit of a glare, but okay. So this it describes, can you see the propeller on the far wall there? So this propeller is from BE-2C airline flown by Lieutenant Frederick Sowry, a British officer in number 39 Squadron Royal Air Force. While on patrol in the early hours of September 24, 1916, Sowry encountered a Zeppelin L-32 on its way back to Germany. After attempting to bomb London, he fired off 3 drums of ammunition from his Lewis machine gun into the Zeppelin, causing it to catch fire and crash near Essex. Sowry was awarded the Distinguished Service Order for his actions. Wow, that's another incredible piece of history. Here is another angle of the incredible plane that's up there. I just want to read to you about this plane before I move on. So it says, look up. Above you flies a reconstruction of Billy Bishop's famous First World War aircraft, the Nieuport 17. Okay, so this is incredible. We're going to go through an exhibit about Passchendaele. Just going to read a little bit about it for you before we go through it. So, the bloody victory. The Battle of Passchendaele, fought in a bog of mud and unburied corpses, stretched human endurance to the breaking point. In July 1917, British commander Sir Douglas Haig ordered his forces to capture Passchendaele Ridge, east of Ypres, Belgium. Massive artillery bombardments shattered the terrain, and unceasing rains turned the battlefield into a sea of mud. After 3 months of fruitless fighting and 200,000 British and Allied casualties, the Canadian Corps captured the ridge in 4 brutal battles. Passchendaele further enhanced the Canadians' growing reputation as elite troops, but at the cost of another 16,000 casualties. Here is a diagram. All right, let's walk through this exhibit. Oh, there are footprints. And sadly, there is a soldier that died here. Wow, that was an interesting exhibit to walk through. Oh, so the Bluebirds, nursing sister Emma Florence Finney of Ballyborough, Ontario, wore the uniform while serving in a hospital in France. Its blue color earned nurses the nickname Bluebirds. Wow, here's some fascinating facts. So, a global sacrifice of the First World War, 9 million dead, 20 million were wounded, 4 empires destroyed: Russia, Austria, Hungary, Turkey, Germany, and then 3 new powers would emerge: the United States, Soviet Union, and Japan. Okay, so this next section we're going into is the aftermath, 1919 to 1931. Wow, look at this beautiful stained glass. Love that. Can you see it says 1918 on it? And there's a statue. All right, so the stained glass windows, many communities created memorials to their fallen, often commissioning stained glass windows for their churches or public buildings. And story on this. So, unarmed soldiers, Canada's war dead remained in overseas cemeteries maintained by the Commonwealth War Grave Commissions, including over 6,000 whose remains were never identified. The Vimy and Menin Gate memorials in France and Belgium contain the names of another 18,000 Canadians whose bodies were never recovered. In 2000, Canada brought home one of its unknown soldiers and buried him at the National War Memorial in Ottawa. His grave marker now rests in the museum's Memorial Hall. So you can see it says on it, a soldier of the Great War, a Canadian regiment. And on the bottom it says, known unto God. And then this statue. Uh, the Drummonds were one of the wealthiest families in Canada when their son, Guy, was killed in April 1915. The family commissioned veteran Robert Mackenzie, a celebrated sculptor and doctor, to memorialize him. All right, so this next section we're going into is the Second World War, 1931 to 1945. And wow, this is a sight for sore eyes. Can you see the damaged window? Wow, what an incredible piece of history, even though it's got a sad context to it. All right, let's read about it. So, a symbol of evil. After coming to power in 1933, Adolf Hitler and his National Socialist Nazi Party imposed a ruthless dictatorial system on Germany. This black armored Mercedes-Benz limousine, which Hitler used as a parade car, helped to propagate this regime's image of strength, power, and modernity. Captured by American troops in 1945 and brought to Canada a few years later, this car recalls one of history's most brutal and murderous dictators. Wow. Here is an image of it in use. And I can't get too close, but mostly just wanted to give you a closer shot of the damaged window. So this is the Link Trainer. The predecessor of today's flight simulators was safe, inexpensive, and cut training time in half. Many pilots found the Link to be far more challenging to operate than real life. Here are some real photos. All right, let's explore this section. All right, so Canada's war at sea. Canada played a crucial role in keeping Allied shipping lanes open despite aggressive attacks by German submarines. Wow. Check this out. So, German submarine warfare, the supreme stealthy weapon. Submarines evaded Allied forces and struck suddenly at unprotected cargo ships. U-boats of the early 1940s performed poorly underwater, submerging mainly to hide from enemy forces, but they were fast and effective on the surface, where their low hulls made them nearly invisible. Surfaced U-boats could get close to their target and deliver a sudden, accurate salvo of torpedoes. So this is a U-boat gun. Most U-boats had powerful deck guns, which could also be used instead of torpedoes to attack merchant ships. Huh, what is this? The Enigma machine was a sophisticated German machine for the encryption of messages. Wow, look at that. All right, so the home front, the defeat of the Axis powers required a total war effort, the complete commitment of all human, natural, and industrial resources to victory. This effort transformed Canada. Wow. Check this out. That's incredible. The home front. Wow, look at this truck. Let's see, what is this? Says, is your knowledge of Canadian automotive vehicle production up to speed? Turn the wheel to change questions and move the gear to light up the answers. All right. So you can turn the wheel and then you can move this to get answers. And the answers are here. One. Oh, I see. Okay. So you have to match the number. So 1, and then you move this to 1, and then it lights up Great Britain. So the question was, Canada produces almost 80% of the wheeled vehicles used by which Allied country army in its defeat of the Germans in North Africa in 1942? And the answer was Great Britain. So that's a fun, interactive way to learn. Check this out. We've got a bank. So, financing the war, the Canadian government launched fundraising campaigns to pay the war's enormous cost. To finance the war, Ottawa looked to the public for loans, launching the first of 9 victory loan and war loan campaigns in 1940. Canadians responded enthusiastically, encouraged by inspiring publicity. By war's end, they had raised $8.8 billion in victory bonds, $318 million through war savings certificates, and another $50 million through the purchase of 25-cent war savings stamps. After the war, Canadians could convert their victory bonds into the now familiar Canada savings bonds. All right, so next door, we can now check out a grocery store. We can see what types of products you could buy back then. You see the image in the background? That was the rationing amounts. And you can see all kinds of interesting historical products. And I am noticing that some of the brands we still have today, like Quaker and Elmer. So rationing, Canadians were encouraged not to hoard food or other goods and to stretch their supplies, but there were still scarcities. From 1942, the government tried to control prices and supervise the distribution of food and other scarce goods. Every man, woman, and child received a personal set of ration books and used it to buy gasoline, butter, sugar, meat, tea, and coffee. Here's some more historic posters. And we got another interesting display here. give it a whirl. So keep or toss. Can you guess which of the following products are salvageable and non-salvageable? You need to lift the panels to find the answers. So a bottle, salvageable. Aluminum saucepan, salvageable. A stone, non-salvageable. Rubber tire, salvageable. A book, salvageable. China figurine, not salvageable. Right, we're gonna go to the next section, which is called the Air War. So, the Air War, the Royal Canadian Air Force, RCAF, became the world's fourth largest by 1945, enlisting more than 250,000 Canadian men and women. Thousands more Canadians served with the British Royal Air Force, the RAF. More than 17,000 Canadian Air Force personnel perished during the war. All right, let's explore this section. Oh, wow. Look at the size of this. I don't know if it translates on camera, but in person it is huge. Wow. Incredible. Just noticed that there is another plane up there as well. Let's just focus on this at the moment. Wow. Okay, I'm gonna go up closer in a second. I just wanted to show you that there is a really fantastic pilot uniform here as well. All right. Let's take a closer look of what we got here. Got a deflated tire. Oh, check this out. You see the broken glass? Wow, incredible piece of history there as well. The RCAF and other fronts, the RCAF became one of the world's great air forces during the war. Canadians participated in most aspects of the air war, flying bombers, fighter reconnaissance, transport, maritime, and other missions at home and across the globe. Now, check this out. This is an interesting piece of history with this. So this is Malta Spitfire. George Burling increased his fame by writing Malta Spitfire, one of the few Canadian combat memoirs written during the war. Wow, was not aware of that. So the Bf 109, one of the war's best German fighters, operated on almost every front. Although its speed was comparable to the Spitfire, the Bf 109 could fly higher and attack Allied aircraft from above. The Bf 109s claimed many Canadian pilots in the skies over Europe. Wow. So important to note. So they're the RCF Women's Division. In 1941, the RCAF was the first of the armed services to establish a women's component. More than 17,000 women served in the Royal Canadian Air Force's Women's Division. Its members served in non-combat roles during the war, performing a wide range of duties from clerical work to aircraft maintenance. From 1942, some of its members were posted to the United Kingdom, where over 1,300 ultimately served. And here, so this is Myrtle Aline Borham. She joined the RCAF in November 1941 and served in Canada before spending 3 years at RCAF headquarters in London, England from 1942 to 1945. In January 1944, she was awarded the British Empire Medal for her devotion to duty and enthusiasm for the service. All right. So we've got 2 sections we can explore here. Let's do Italy first. 1943 to 1945. All right, let's see what's got here. So in the summer of 1943, Canadian and Allied forces conquered Sicily and invaded the Italian mainland, seeking to defeat Italy and to tie down German forces. So the battle for Ortona, Italy surrendered with the Allied invasion of the southern mainland on September 3rd, 1943, but German forces continued to fight after a grueling and costly advance up to Italian peninsula. Canadian forces reached the town of Ortona on December 20th, 1943. For over a week, they fought a vicious house-to-house struggle through booby-trapped buildings and narrow rubble-blocked streets against elite German paratroopers. The Canadians sustained over 700 casualties in capturing the town. Here is an image of all the damage. All right, so now we get to walk through another interesting interactive display. Over to a chair and rubble, and the ceiling is blasted out. Here's a soldier who is hiding. And then you can walk through here. More rubble. Oh, and we got another soldier on the other side. Hand grenades, small but deadly. So the hand grenade was a preferred weapon of Canadian and German soldiers during the close fighting at Ortona. Consisting of an explosive charge and a time fuse, it was simple to use and unleashed great destructive power. Soldiers used them against the enemy before entering buildings and to attack built-up positions. And here is a real photo of them holding a grenade. All right, so the Gothic line Canadians gained a reputation as tough assault troops. They breached the Hitler line of fortifications south of Rome in May 1944. On August 25th, they attacked the heavily defended Gothic line in northern Italy, aiming to capture the town of Rimini. Here is a diagram. And check this out. This is incredible. Look at the size of it. Wow. Incredible. Look at this. So, I'm not even going to attempt to pronounce this word right here. The Canadians and the Gothic Line encountered several types of German tanks and self-propelled assault guns, such as these German, this word 3, or Stoogie 3, an effective close range and anti-tank weapon. The Stug 3's deadly 75 millimeter high velocity gun made it a powerful and dangerous adversary. Oh, just give you, there's a close-up view of the image. Again, forgive me if I pronounce any of these German words incorrectly. All right, so next we're gonna go through the other section next door. So this is Normandy, 1944. So Canadian air, sea, and land forces helped spearhead the massive assault on German-occupied Europe in 1944. All right. Wow. All right, let's check out this ship. Incredible. So clearing the English Channel. Naval preparations for the invasion of Europe began late in 1943, with Allied warships clearing the English Channel of enemy vessels. Allied naval forces that included 110 Canadian warships and 10,000 sailors supported the Normandy landings. Canadian ships and sailors helped protect the invasion fleet, cleared German minefields, bombarded German coastal positions, and ferried Allied troops across the channel. And I just wanted to show you one other thing that caught my eye right here. So Canadian secret agents slipped behind enemy lines to undermine German defenses in preparation for the Allied invasion. Special Operation Executive SOE dropped secret agents trained at Camp X, located between Oshawa and Whitby, Ontario, into German-occupied Europe to gather information, organize underground resistance movement, and conduct sabotage. SOE recruited many French Canadians like Marc Caza. If captured, they faced torture and execution. Wow. All right. So we're going to walk through this. So Canada D-Day. On June 6, 1944, Canada participated as a full partner with the United States and the United Kingdom in the greatest amphibious invasion in history, codenamed Operation Overlord, but generally known as D-Day. Some 14,000 Canadians were among the nearly 150,000 Allied troops who landed or parachuted along the invasion area. Step aboard the next landing craft and accompany Canadian troops as they hit the heavily defended beaches on this historic day. All right, let's walk through this. This is this is really cool. And if you look up, there's planes on the ceiling. All kinds of things to see here as well. So Germany's armed forces used some of the war's best small arms, machine guns, and artillery in the Battle for Normandy, fighting from high ground and strong defensive positions. The Germans used heavy machine guns to force attacking soldiers to find cover, then bombarded them with terrifying rocket and mortar attacks. Even small German forces equipped with these weapons and in good positions could inflict heavy casualties and slow the Allied advance. All right, let's take a closer look at everything they got here.
Après, c'est fini.
Incredible.
Ouais,
So the PAC 38, the 50 millimeter, I'm just going to show you, I do not know how to pronounce this word here, was used widely in the early years of the war. From 1942, shortages of tungsten for its shells reduced its effectiveness, especially against heavily armored Russian tanks. Against less heavily armored Allied tanks in Italy and Northwest Europe, including Canadian Shermans, it remained deadly at short ranges. The Flak 38, the 20 millimeter flak gun, replaced the Flak 30 used during the Spanish Civil War and the invasion of Poland as Germany's standard light anti-aircraft weapon. It was also useful in support of infantry and occasionally as an anti-tank gun. The Flak 38 had a much higher rate of fire than its predecessor and was used in a variety of roles until the end of the war. Wow. Check out this. Incredible to be able to get up close to these machines. Wow, look at it from the front. Just for a second, I'm going to show you video of it in action. Wow. So I'm just going to read you a little bit about it. So this German tank survived fighting through France, Belgium, the Netherlands, and Germany. The Governor General's Foot Guards received 69 tanks before their July 1944 arrival in France. This was the only one not put out of action by war's end, although it was struck several times by enemy fire. The dent caused by one hit can be seen on the tank's side. I wonder if this is the dent. Might be. All right. I hope you enjoyed seeing this. I am now going to take you to the next exhibit. Let's go check it out. All right, so next we're going to go through Liberation and Victory, 1944 to 1945. The Wasp flamethrower. The Wasp was a self-propelled flamethrower. The projector was mounted on the front of a modified universal carrier fitted with a 341-liter fuel tank. The Wasp could hurl a burning stream of fuel up to 90 meters. Terrifying to the enemy, this weapon was sometimes equally hazardous for its Allied operators if the fuel tank was hit and exploded. And here's an image. Wow. Check that out. How cool is that? All right, so here's another vehicle. So, the humble Jeep, the four-wheel drive quarter-ton general purpose MB vehicle, or Jeep, was one of the workhorses of Allied armies throughout the war. Produced in the United States, the Jeep was fast and reliable on damaged or non-existent roads. The Canadian Army used Jeeps extensively, especially in the muddy, thawing ground of the Rhineland. So, liberating the Netherlands in April 1945, the 1st Canadian Army swept north, liberating the Netherlands from 5 years of Nazi occupation and providing food and medical help to the starving population. Canadians had reached Oldenburg in northern Germany when the Germans surrendered. Here's some images. So by 1945, over 1 million men and women had served in Canada's armed forces from a population of just 11 million. 42,000 died. 54,400 were wounded. Even so, Canadians were fortunate the war was not fought on their soil. Worldwide, over 55 million died, the majority of them civilians. Wow, what a tragedy. So again, I'm just going to highlight this once again because it is a big part of Canadian history. The unknown soldier tombstone. This is the standard tombstone used by the Commonwealth War Graves Commission to mark the graves of unknown Canadian soldiers killed at Dieppe, August 19th, 1942. The commission gave this sample tombstone to the Canadian War Museum for a special exhibition commemorating the 40th anniversary of the disastrous raid. So here it is.
Our Orthodox translation is always anything anywhere else except the United States. Done a pretty good job. We were full of confidence.
All right. So next we're going to move on
That the next decade
to the next
the century was.
section. So a violent peace, the Cold War, peacekeeping, and recent conflicts, 1945 to the present. So the North. So controlling the Arctic was part of Canada's post-war focus on continental defense and its growing preoccupation with national sovereignty. Having worried for years about the large American military presence in the North as a result of the war, Canada's first post-war northern operations helped to assert its sovereignty and increasingly brought to attention its vulnerability to Soviet infiltration. Northern operations also had more limited objectives. Here are some images. And you gotta look up, there's a plane. All right, let's explore. So the Second World War alliance of the Soviet Union and the Western democracies was short-lived, opposing worldviews, mutual suspicion, and territorial disputes soon deteriorated into the Cold War, a global military confrontation that lasted over 40 years. There's a bunch of flags. Korea. So communist North Korea's invasion of South Korea in June 1950 sparked a 3-year war that devastated both countries and killed or wounded more than 3.5 million people. Another plane. Oh, wow. Look at this on my left. Let's explore this a little bit more. Say, the Royal Canadian Navy in Korean waters, 8 destroyers of the Royal Canadian Navy served in Korean wars combined. These warships sailed over 1 million kilometers during the Korean War. Let's see. Oh, okay, so you can flip these and press the button to hear the 4.5-inch naval guns firing. Oh, hopefully the camera's picking that up. So you can listen, and I'll flip through this.
Direct your control. Follow the orders. Trainer on. Fire on. Salvo. Right gun ready. Left gun ready. Range 040. Deflection 10 left. Sights moving. Sights moving. Sights set. Let's go.
Naval gun turret, which I believe is right here next to me. The Canadian warships used guns like these during the Korean War, and for many years afterwards, neither of the 4-inch barrels in this turret produced by Sorel Industries in Quebec, was ever installed on a warship. The turret itself was mounted on the frigate HMCS Victoriaville. Here is another angle of it. Gives you perspective of how much bigger it is than I am. So for the Canadian Army, Korea was largely an infantry and artillery war fought by hilltop positions against a skilled, determined enemy. And wow, check out this vehicle. That's incredible. So this is the M3 half-track. Armed with heavy machine guns, armored half-tracks like this one helped repeal a Chinese attack against the headquarters of 2nd Battalion Princess Patricia's Canadian Light Infantry during the April 1951 battle at Kapyong. Lieutenant Colonel Jim Stone, 2 PPCLI commanding officer, recalled driving off the attack. We held fire until they broke through the trees, and then 12 machine guns cut loose together. The enemy never had a chance. Here is a photo. All right, let's explore what else we can find in here. Wow, I like this. Static lines of defense in Korea's mountainous terrain increase the importance of small unit patrols to gather information and keep the enemy off guard. Let's see what we got here. So a radio. One of the most important pieces of military equipment was a radio necessary for calling in artillery support or medical evacuations. Radios continue to form a lifeline in military operations. A war artist and sniper. War artist Edward Zuber was also a sniper with 5 confirmed kills. Sergeant M. Procluck of the Royal Canadian Artillery remained at his post, relaying accurate information to his troop commander despite intense shelling. He was awarded the Military Medal for his actions. Oh, this is interesting. This photo, war paint. Soldiers applied camouflage to their faces in preparation for night patrols. Oh, so you can see the back now. How cool is this? Wow, incredible. Again, in real life, it is huge. So you can read you more about it here. So the naval gun turret, Canadian warships use guns like these during the Korean War and for many years afterwards. Neither of the 4-inch barrels in this turret, produced by Sorel Industries in Quebec, was ever installed on a warship, but the turret itself was mounted on the frigate HMCS Victoriaville. There's an image. And then here, you got a diagram. Let's see. So it says, number 1, so number 1 is this guy here. The gun layer, this sailor turned the hand crank to elevate or depress the guns. On the other side of the turret, the trainer works a mechanism to rotate the guns to port and starboard. 2, this guy right here. So he is the gun captain. Among other tasks, the gun captain is responsible for operating the breech mechanism and manually firing the gun using the trigger bar shown here. 3, so this guy right here, he is the tray worker. The tray worker is responsible for loading the gun. Each complete round of ammunition weighs 30 kilograms. Watching, waiting. The Cold War was a potentially deadly waiting game. In situation rooms and command centers like this one, military and civilian authorities on both sides watched one another's every move and prepared to sound the alarm for war if an attack appeared likely. So then check this out. How cool is this? So I'm just gonna walk up to one of them. So you can sit here. Let's see. And then you've got all the buttons here. I have no idea what they will do, but let's just for fun do something. Oh, actually, I found out. Okay, so here it says, instructions, press a flag to see each country's contributions along the central front. Okay. Let's see, what do I want to press? Let's press Canada, of course. Let's see what happens. Oh, ta-da. Wow, okay. Look at this. A model of so this is the last aircraft carrier, the HMCS Bonaventure, entered Canadian service in 1957. Following her purchase from the Royal Navy and later conversion, the carrier provided the fleet with long-range air and anti-submarine defenses, as well as the capacity to transport troops. The carrier was decommissioned in 1970 to cut costs and was not replaced. I'm just gonna give you a more detailed view of it. Oh, wow. The plane there. There you go. You can see Bonaventure on the side. There's even guns on the side. Wow, so this is important. So I'll just back up for a second. Again, up here, there is also a plane up there. Let's check this out. So Canada was a nuclear armed power for more than 20 years, from 1963 to 1984, and a member of Nuclear Armed Alliance since 1949, apocalyptic in their effects. Nuclear weapons may also have contributed to a balance of terror, deterring each side from aggression or adventurism for fear of a catastrophic nuclear exchange. So this is a model of Honest John missile. It was a simple free flight rocket that could also deliver a low-yield nuclear warhead. And this is a model of the CF-104 starfighter. It had more nicknames than perhaps any other Canadian aircraft, including the Missile with a Man in It, the Widowmaker, and the Lawn Dart. Love that. Wow, what is this? The pig suit. Defense researchers often used animals to investigate the effects of nuclear, biological, and chemical weapons on humans. This suit was custom made for a pig, an animal whose skin, hair, follicles, sweat glands, and fat composition are similar to those of people. Wow. So, the federal government's cancellation of the innovative but controversial Arrow project in 1959 led to the destruction of all 6 existing airframes. Most of the material went to a scrap metal dealer. This nose cone is one of the few large pieces that survived. Several others can be found at the Canada Aviation Museum. I have also done a video of that museum, so I will link it to the end of this video for you if you're interested in seeing that. So in front of me is the nose cone of the CF-105 Avro Arrow. And here is the seat. And yeah, so this photo shows the Arrow in flight. The Avro Canada CF-105 or Avro Arrow was the most advanced fighter design in its day. RL-201, pictured here, made the first Arrow test flight on March 25th, 1958. Show it to you from the other side. All right. So let's explore the next section of the museum. So check out this vehicle. So this is a Ferret Scout car. This 2-person armored car is painted white to identify it as a UN vehicle. So peacekeeping tragedy. These fragments are from Buffalo 115-461, a Canadian aircraft shot down in 1974 by Syrian surface-to-air missiles. The 9 people killed represent the greatest single loss of life in Canadian peacekeeping history. Okay, so I love this display. says UN on the barrels. So more than 29,000 Canadians served in the multinational United Nations peacekeeping force in Cyprus from 1964 to 1993. Soldiers monitored the ceasefire while on patrol or during shifts at observation posts along the Green Line, a narrow buffer zone between Greek and Turkish forces. This monotonous work helped prevent the escalation of small ceasefire violations into widespread violence. And I'm just going to show you that there is a little, like a mock of a cafe in here, which is kind of a nice touch. And if you look down in this next section, there's all kinds of doing my best to keep my shadow out of the way. So the Cold War determined how Canada and the United States defended the continent. It also influenced books, music, movies, and sports, as well as civil liberties, scientific research, and government spending. The Cold War placed every Canadian at risk of imminent death. That's intense. Governments informed civilians of the risks of nuclear war and trained them in survival techniques. Bomb shelters provided some protection from blast effects, fire, and fallout, and offered hope that a nuclear war could be endured. The Emergency Measures Organization, EMO, published a variety of homemade design options from simple sandbag enclosures to deep concrete reinforcement shelters. It also published information on families' food, water supply, and hygiene needs while living underground. And I have also done a video of the Diva Bunker, which is just outside of Ottawa. So if you enjoy learning more about Cold War and the Diefenbunker, Bunker, I will also link that to the end of this video for you. Wow, so there's still lots for us to explore in this museum. Trudeau's Canada, terrorist attacks by radical separatists in Quebec led the federal government to invoke the War Measures Act, using the military to stop the violence. There's some uniforms. So the creation of the Canadian Forces marked a decade of rapid change for Canada's military. Prior to 1968, a separate Army, Navy, and Air Force had each maintained its own uniforms, support structure, and working culture. A reorganization and cost-cutting exercise first combined many functions, and then in 1968 unified the services. Standardized uniforms and other common procedures replaced older traditions from the 1960s. Federal policy and human rights rulings also increased the use of French in the military and began to abolish many limits and restrictions on the recruitment and service of women. And here is a uniform for women. kinds of interesting artifacts. So this is about so Canada's 700 strong search and rescue team is one of the best in the world. The force responds to several thousand requests for assistance each year from bases across the country, and its personnel have earned countless awards for heroism. Wow. Give you a better view of this. So field artillery units use the C2 105mm howitzer, a mobile general purpose weapon that is towed by a truck and has a 7-person crew. Howitzers normally fire at long range up to 11 kilometers against targets invisible to the naked eye, but can also be used in a direct fire mode against closer targets. This particular gun was retired from the Canadian Forces in '98 after firing 13,624 rounds. And here is a picture of it in action. Wow. So this is also interesting. So the reserves are part-time military personnel who play a vital role in the defense of Canada at home and overseas. Wow, here is another incredible tank. There's another ship. And uniforms. So the HMCS Toronto, one of the 12 guided missile patrol frigates in Canadian service, is a sophisticated multi-purpose warship. The ship can defend itself above and below the water line with 2 missile systems, a Bofors 57mm gun, torpedoes, and other weapons and sensors. It carries a naval helicopter and a crew of 215. I'll just give you an even closer look at it. There you can see the helicopter and helicopter pad at the end. And I'll just quickly read you about the uniforms. So Canada abolished the tri-service uniform in 1985 and replaced it with DEUs, or distinctive environmental uniforms. Army, Navy, and Air Force personnel each received summer and winter outfits, new uniforms, new equipment, and a much larger defense budget were part of a sweeping plan to revitalize the Canadian Forces in the 1980s. All right, now we're coming up to an incredible piece of history, a piece of the Berlin Wall. So in 1991, the government of Germany presented this section of the Berlin Wall to Canada. A year earlier, officials from East and West Germany, the United States and Soviet Union, the UK and France had met in Ottawa, where they agreed to a framework for peaceful German reunification. So here, picture from the fall of the Berlin Wall. So, the fall of the Berlin Wall in 1989 symbolized the dramatic end of the Cold War. The sudden collapse of communism was surprisingly, particularly following a decade of tough talk and military confrontation. Within 2 years, East and West Germany had been unified. The Warsaw Pact and the Soviet Union had ceased to exist, and arms control agreements promised to eliminate thousands of nuclear weapons. So, yeah, incredible to have a piece of it here in our Canadian War Museum. New World disorder. Canadians hoped that the end of the Cold War would lead to a more peaceful future. Instead, a changing international landscape produced new threats. Won't go over all of them, but we'll cover a few of them. So there was the Gulf War. Canada helped liberate Kuwait after Iraqi forces invaded the country. So Iraqi forces invaded Kuwait on August 1st, 1990. The United Nations Security Council called for Iraq's withdrawal. By January 91, led by the United States, the coalition that included Canada sent air, land, and naval forces to the Persian Gulf. When Iraq refused to withdraw from Kuwait, the coalition launched an attack to liberate the country. Iraq's defeat in February 91 ended the war. Here's an image.
Le Rwanda appartient à seul le papa de Trump.
So, Canadians serving at Camp Canada Dry in Qatar posted these directional signs to illustrate distances to their hometowns. Love that. Right, so this section we're getting into more modern day. Wow, check out this. The damage on this vehicle. I'll kind of show you inside. So it was a UN vehicle. So this Canadian vehicle was attacked by Serbian troops in Croatia in '94. This plate shows 54 bullets of the type that struck this vehicle. 10 hit the driver and passenger. So here you go. Wow. So Kosovo, 99, in March 1999, Canada joined a NATO air campaign to stop Serbian military operations in the Serbian province of Kosovo. A CF-18 fighter pilot, Captain Paul Frigo, of 416 Squadron, wore this flight suit and helmet during his missions over Kosovo. Given the risk of being shot down by Serbian anti-aircraft defenses and captured, Frigo and other pilots removed identifiers such as their name, squadron, and rank patches from their uniforms while flying missions. That's interesting to know. All right, see what else I can find in here. Afghanistan War. In 2001, Canada joined a multinational mission in Afghanistan following the 9/11 Al-Qaeda terrorist attacks against the United States. The Taliban government in Afghanistan sheltered the terrorist group. Canadians helped remove the Taliban from power and stabilized Afghanistan's new government. They later fought against the Taliban and their allies in Kandahar and trained Afghan soldiers. The mission in Afghanistan, one of Canada's longest, ended in 2014. Oh, I'm gonna backtrack. I want to show you. So this is fascinating. So from the 9/11 terrorist attacks, this is a fragment of one of two airliners hijacked by Al-Qaeda terrorists and flown into the World Trade Center in New York City on September 11th, 2001. Terrorists crashed a third airplane into the Pentagon in Washington, D.C. Passengers aboard a fourth aircraft fought the hijackers who crashed the plane in a Pennsylvania field. Al-Qaeda leadership in Afghanistan financed and planned the attacks, which killed more than 3,000 people, including 24 Canadians. A terrible tragedy. Wow. Okay. So Canadian soldiers sometimes captured Taliban fighters and individuals suspected of supporting the insurgency. Since the Canadian government did not want to hold prisoners of war, the military instead transferred people they detained to Afghanistan's security forces. Canadian military forces use objects like these ones, in this case, to restrain and process detainees before their handover. So, number one is flexible handcuffs. Number two are ear protectors and goggles used to handle detainees. And number three are sandals issued to prisoners. Wow, so this is an interesting, very interesting display. Hidden weapons, cheaply produced and easily hidden, improvised explosive devices, IEDs varied in size. Small devices might injure or kill a single soldier. Large bombs could destroy heavily armored vehicles. More Canadian soldiers were killed by IEDs than any other means during the war. Canadian combat engineers found these materials in Afghanistan. They were used as evidence to find Taliban bomb makers. Let's see here. Okay, so I need to start from over here. So this is a pressure plate trigger, a portable radio detonator, a detonator battery box, a oil jug filled with homemade explosive, a disarmed pressure cooker bomb, and bomb fragments. Wow. All right, now check out this vehicle. Wow. Look at the level of damage that can happen. Incredible that the front is completely destroyed, but let's read about this. So, in December 2005, Afghan insurgents detonated an improvised explosive device that destroyed the front of this G-Wagon. Captain Manuel Panchana Moya, Privates Ryan Crawford and Russell Murdoch, and a journalist were saved by the vehicle's protective armor. The blast threw the vehicle's engine nearly 7 meters. Wow. And then Camp Nathan Smith. This sign displayed above the G-Wagon marked the entrance to the Canadian-led provincial reconstruction team camp in Kandahar City. The PRT included soldiers, diplomats, and aid workers who contributed to Canadian development and security goals in Kandahar. Private Nathan Smith was a Canadian soldier killed by friendly fire in 2002. All right, so I'll just show you the sign one last time here. So you can see at the top, it says Nathan Smith. The world has undergone profound changes since the end of the Cold War. International order swings between stability and chaos. At home, we consider and debate the issues surrounding terrorism and human rights and weigh our options for taking action to contribute to a safer world. Overseas, Canadian military personnel and civilians support allies, offer disaster relief, and confront threats to the world's safety and security. Our history is ongoing. Thanks for watching my video of the journey through Canada's military history here at the Canadian War Museum in Ottawa, Ontario, Canada. I hope you enjoyed it. Right in front of me is the LeBreton Gallery, which is in the lower level of the Canadian War Museum. I have also done a full video tour of all the military equipment you can see here, and I will link it to the end of this video for you if that is of interest. All right, thank you so much for watching. I appreciate you. If you enjoy videos about things to do in Ontario, Canada, please subscribe to my channel. Until next time, happy travels.